The Trump administration is incredibly incompetent. Their lawyers are incredibly incompetent, and they often write their legislation or their executive orders in a way that is unclear, confusing, outright unconstitutional, or has so many holes in it.
They are going through with it. They are removing people. They are pulling commanders from deployments. So you're leaving hundreds and hundreds of troops who are set to, be in positions strategically necessary for whatever happens are no longer with a commander. You've got people like myself who are doctors. I have a whole network of doctors that are actively serving right now, and we're all being processed out.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Most of the content on my channel is supported by generous patrons, but made available for free to the entire world. If you support that, please consider adding your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates. This clip, however, is from one of the many programs that I do on YouTube on The Line. And if you liked it, feel free to visit, like, subscribe, and watch The Line Network live. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to the Hang Up. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Thanks for joining us tonight. Look, what's my hang up today? Well, it's got to do with military service. And so for those who don't know, yes, the mustache only is a temporary thing because we've raised almost $100,000 for Recovering from Religion. You can check around here on the line for a link, and you can go and support Recovering from Religion as well. But that's why I don't look normal. But it also reminds me that during the period of time where I was in the military, I couldn't wear a beard because it interferes with gas masks, and you could only have a mustache if you submitted a chit and got permission, which I did. So I looked a little like this, only with a darker mustache, many, many years ago. I left high school and had a girlfriend and wanted to get married and had no real prospects for what I was going to be focusing on or what job or career I was going to do. I was working at a fast food place. And after graduating high school, I just kind of felt, what am I going to do? And my dad had been in the Navy. My grandfather had been in the Navy. And so I went down to the recruiter's office and walked in, and they pitched a wonderful naval nuclear power program that came with a $30,000 or $35,000 bonus that provided I passed, the tests, which, I did. And I just figured, you know what? This is probably the best career path that I'm likely to get right now. At least to earn some money and maybe give myself some direction so that I'm not just flipping burgers. A few days after I went ahead and enlisted, before I left, this would have been early summer of 1987 after I graduated. The fast food place I was working for, the manager came up and said, "Hey, if you're interested, we really like the work you're doing here. We'd like to send you off to our manager training program and then give you your own restaurant to manage." And I was like, crap, that might have been a better option, but I had to tell them no because I'd already enlisted. I spent a total of 8.5 years in the Navy. I started off in the nuclear power program. I was a electronics technician and was in power school when I got kicked out for oversleeping. That's one of the things the Navy does a lot of, is those programs with the big bonuses often have high attrition rates, and people get pissed about it. But, I knew what I was signing up for. I knew the risks. And what happened was I lost that position and the girlfriend that I was in love with and was planning to marry, all at the same time. And so I just ended up out in the fleet, aimless. I wound up as a bosun's mate running first division, loved it, would have stayed in if it weren't for the fact that once I hit E5, I kept acing the test for E6, but there were 400 people in front of me. So I ended up failing the PT test after re-enlisting, and just was medically discharged, which was basically me saying, I hate this. I hate running. I hate the physical fitness part of it. I'm in here because, this was my only option. And now I don't have any direction again. But I was in from 87 to 95, almost 96. And there was a lot of conversation going on at that time, particularly surrounding gays in the military and the don't ask, don't tell policy that had been begun by President Clinton And the interesting thing for me about Don't Ask, Don't Tell is that it was only really applied to the enlistment thing. Once you were in, it was just assumed that if that you were not going to ask or tell because there was no protection. If you were found out, you were just removed from military. I've told the story before about how one of the guys in my division got a letter from his boyfriend, put it underneath his rack. Everybody knew he was gay. Nobody cared except for one dude who was only in the Navy because the judge had given him the option of join the Navy or go to prison. So he went in the Navy, and he was a monumental piece of shit. Whereas my gay friend was amazing and career-minded, long-term military career-minded. And when this other hateful dude saw the letter and went and stole it from underneath this guy's rack, took it up to the master at arms and says, I found this laying on the deck, and I think it's a letter from one man in love with another man who's, just whoops, look what happened. And of course, they had to investigate. And then we end up processing that person out of the Navy. And I was there at the captain's mast, and I was explaining to the captain, from my standpoint, this is one of the best sailors that we have in our division and in our department. And it's an absolute shame that somebody who has been an A1 sailor the whole time and career-minded is going to be kicked out because of this policy. And I think the captain agreed with me, but there's nothing that could be done. But while there was a lot of discussion about gays in the military, our command master chief was an older black guy who would tell all the stories about things they used to say about African Americans in the military. Oh, they need to be in a separate thing. They're destructive to military, to the cohesiveness of the unit and stuff. So all the things that they said about gays in the military, they also said about blacks in the military, and they also said about women in the military. When I was in my final, my first main ship that I was on was CVN 71, the USS Theodore Roosevelt. It's an aircraft carrier. And there were no women on the Roosevelt when I served. There were later on in its service. And so over the last 50, 60 years, the rules for who can serve and in what capacity have changed and grown to where we generally recognize that men and women can both serve, and we're allowing women in combat positions and hot zones and other things. And you would think, okay, we're just kind of done with it, because this is a job that is also one where people willingly give up many of the rights and protections that other citizens of the United States benefit from in order to support the cohesiveness of the unit. You are under orders. You have to follow orders, provided they're legal orders. You are sacrificing your time and putting your life at risk. We just celebrated, or I guess commemorated, Memorial Day. I saw that George Strait told people happy birthday, and somebody jumped all over him and he took the post down. I think that's a bit too far, because let's be honest, when most Americans celebrate or commemorate Memorial Day, they're having a barbecue and a party and saying, hey, I hope you have a happy Memorial Day. Your happiness should not be that people died, but that people were willing to fight to allow you to have a pleasant Memorial Day, to remember them and to cherish and value the freedoms that they help protect and guarantee. But trans folks have had an insanely rough go. And my guest tonight is going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But when the first trans person I met who was serving openly in the military, this was shortly after I became an atheist activist. It was at a convention. She sat there and talked to me for a couple of hours. We had a good time. We were talking about how at that time, and this would have been probably 2010, 2011, something like that, she was having to spend every day serving as a man, and then all of her free time as who she was. And we had conversations. I talked to others about the process of pretending, the process of going along, and that the military was essentially forcing people to lie, to set aside their integrity in order to pretend to be someone that they knew that they weren't, in order to fit antiquated ideas in the military. And I think everybody kind of got that without realizing, what are we doing asking people to lie? How does that represent the integrity of our service people? Well, it's funny that the trans bans in the military have gone through a number of different phases, and we'll get to the latest one. But I was thinking, I was like, well, if the administration's model is that there's only two genders, men and women, and we already know that men can serve and women can serve, then who exactly are you banning? You're not banning anybody. If that's, according to your model, that's all there is, then who are you banning and what are you banning them about? Because if you don't have access to someone's mental state, then you can't claim they're lying. You can just claim that you reject gender ideology. If you're banning someone for their gender expression, that is an act and not a person. It's also not necessarily an identity. Are you going to ban drag? Because I guarantee you, a lot of those E7 secret initiation things have some drag stuff and have some other stuff going on. I'm not supposed to know, but I know. And if you're only banning gender expression, that's not a person or a thing. And so then it gets to what we're currently looking at is gender dysphoria. And they keep going back to this thing, and this is common for those of you who are going to wind up stuck defending trans folks. It's mental illness. Well, first of all, it's not. It's just not. It's not in the DSM, and you don't get to run around declaring mental illness and making laws against a mental illness if there's not an actual diagnostic in the DSM for this. So instead of going with trans being a mental illness, they're going to go with gender dysphoria, and we're going to get Ben in and talk about that in a minute. But when you look at this and you're trying to figure out exactly what is going on, I was baffled, because it's like, who are you banning and under what criteria? For the people that are like, oh, this is mental health issue. It's not. But let's assume for a second that being trans in and of itself, fully encapsulated, was just a mental health issue, as they want to claim. Are you saying you're just going to treat people with a mental health issue shitty? Are you saying you're going to ignore all the best science about the treatment for those conditions? I don't get what's going on. It's like saying, oh, here's someone with a mental health condition. Fuck them, throw them out. You're terrible. We don't want you around. None of that is consistent with best medical principles, best practices with regard to medical diagnoses, with regard to psychology. So none of it fits. And it's like, well, what's actually going on here? Now, for the most part, I think Trump's ban was just him kind of pandering to the base. They ran on, let's make trans folks, the boogeyman. And now that they're the boogeyman, we can just say trans this, trans this, trans this. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, they're coming for your kids, they're trying to turn your little boys into little girls, they're trying to turn your little girls into little boys, they're trying to cut off perfectly healthy breast tissue of young girls. I don't know why these people are sitting around thinking about kids with regard to their breasts and sex and all this other weirdness, but they're really worried. And mostly they're worried that the bigotry that they'd like to express keeps getting shrunk. It can't be bigoted against this group or this group or this group anymore, because there's been sufficient pushback from the world to at least make them slightly shameful about some of it. But they can still go after the trans folks. The problem is, once you start allowing that, now they're comfortable going after everybody else, which is why there are multiple people who are raising money off the fact that they would call someone the N-word and then raise funds to protect them legally in case, just in case, just in case. The world is getting more hateful, less cooperative. And I think it was one of the advocates, or one of the people suing was Commander Emily Schilling. And my apologies if I get her quote wrong, but I think this is her that said this. It was brilliant, pointing out that the irony that trans folks are too good to be allowed to play sports and too bad to be allowed to serve in the military. And the strange dichotomy that we see in all of these transphobic or trans hate that's being tossed around, none of it makes sense. I wish somebody could make it make sense, because a good chunk of it seems to be straight old homophobia that they're just displacing onto trans folks, even though gender and sexuality are distinct. It's like, let's just make a little bucket where the weird queer folks, whatever, LGBTQIA plus super letters, let's just dump all them in a bucket and piss all over them. It seems to be the mindset. You're different. You're the odd one out. But I would be okay if everybody recognized that you're different and you're odd. But since people seem to start be accepting you, that means I might become the one that is weird and different, and we fucking can't have that. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, I haven't been in the military since 1996. So I don't know. That's a long goddamn time. I don't know much about anything that's going on or what it's like now at all. But I have a friend. I have a friend who's agreed to join me tonight. Please welcome Dr. Ben, who you all know from the Transatlantic Call-In Show. Ben, how
Hello.
are you overall?
Overall, I'm doing okay. I know a lot of people are concerned about my current situation, and as we discussed kind of before the show, I'm at the better end of everything. Granted, it's a terrible situation. And yes, the rumors are true that trans people are being kicked out of the military. Like, it is happening. I am currently on admin leave as I process out of the military. So it'll take several months for everything to actually go through, but this is real. All of this is real. The people that said, nothing's going to happen, these are just threats, this is just performative, absolutely not true. They are going through with it. They are removing people. They are removing people who are actively in on deployments right now. They are pulling commanders from deployments. So you're leaving hundreds and hundreds of troops who are set to, be in positions strategically necessary for whatever happens, are no longer with a commander. You've got people like myself who are doctors. I have a whole network of doctors that are actively serving right now, and we're all being processed out. So
Mm.
even if you don't like trans people, think about what this is doing, like this is actually doing to our military and to the people that are serving, especially those in enlisted positions where, they went to basic training, they went to a few months of AIT or whatever their individual training is, and then where do they go? They don't have family to necessarily support them all the time, like they're trans, and there aren't a whole lot of jobs available for those people. So this is real, and I just want to say, like, I'm super super angry about everything that's going on, and anybody who contributed to us losing our jobs, like, fuck you. I'm just gonna say that. Um, because yeah, you're costing a lot of people. You're causing a lot of damage to people, a lot of harm. You're gonna cause a lot of homelessness, a lot of veteran homelessness, because you either didn't want to vote, protest voted, or voted in favor of this. So thanks to whoever contributed to that.
So I guess we ought to start with, what exactly have they banned? Because often when they make
Yeah.
a You know, when they pass when he signs an executive order or they throw out some law, the Trump administration is incredibly incompetent. Their lawyers are incredibly incompetent, and they often write their legislation or their executive orders in a way that is unclear, confusing, outright unconstitutional, or has so many holes in it that they'd end up, discharging 90% of the force if we followed it to the letter. So what exactly are they
Yeah.
banning now?
It's very unclear, and in fact, they're the way they choose to define it depends on the context that it's in. Because according to the court proceedings, they are claiming that they're banning gender dysphoria because it is disruptive. Um, Basically, that's what they're trying to say. They're trying to say we're not banning trans people, we're banning gender dysphoria because those people are mentally ill and disruptive. But there's no evidence that trans people are causing disruption or that they are mentally ill. And people who are disruptive and have mental illness to the point where they need support that exceeds the military's capability or would cause them to be harmed by serving longer, they already have a process to escort those people out. There's already a medical review process that will identify those people and get them out of the military for safety reasons. But they've told this to the court that it's just gender dysphoria. However, their actual ban is essentially a witch hunt to identify anybody that might be gender diverse or in some way non-conforming with traditional gender roles. So anyone that has ever attempted to transition. So anyone that has, like, you could lump under this, like anyone that has worn the uniform of the opposite sex. You could include people that have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, even if they've never taken hormone therapy or attempted surgery. But if they've ever, if they have it in their record that they have wanted those things, they're probably also out. Um, it's really any accusation that you can make that somebody has attempted to transition or has gender dysphoria, they're outright banned. And there's technically a waiver, but the waiver to keep you in requires you to not have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and have never been on hormone therapy. And essentially it protects people in the closet. Like, it protects people who,
Why would people in the closet need a
like, have,
waiver?
yeah, right, they don't. So it's a waiver that's there for appearances, but it's not actually keeping anybody in. It's
It's so
yeah,
strange
it's all
because
it's all a show.
you can't. So the phrasing is wild. You can't ban gender dysphoria any more than you can ban depression. But so you're banning
Yep.
people, but the wording is essentially the one that was up at the Supreme Court. The Department of Defense says the medical, surgical, and mental health constraints on individuals who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms with gender dysphoria
Yep.
are incompatible with the high mental and physical standards necessary for military service. Let me tell you, at least when I was in, um, to whatever extent someone may suffer from gender dysphoria, I don't see how it's incompatible with the high mental and physical standards necessary for military service, considering there are other conditions that are similarly impactful and debilitating that aren't banned. And when you have people who are basically sentenced, as the guy was talking about earlier, sentenced to do military service instead of going to prison, are we evaluating to figure out what psychological issues that person has? Or are we letting murderous psychopaths loose because in the military because we haven't done anything? Does it attract that? I don't know where the demonstration is. On twofold here. One, not everybody who's trans has a diagnosis or should have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. That would be, like, my understanding would be that would be the trans med position, that you're just not trans without that, when that's not necessarily the case. And then two, where's the demonstration that gender dysphoria is genuinely a problem for military service when we have so many people who are actively doing their job consistently, and not seemingly being incompatible with this.
Yeah, that's the whole paradox, if you will. Like, they claim that all the people with gender dysphoria are causing disruption in their units, and that they're dishonest, people who lack integrity. Those are actual words that they put into the ban. They are doing it because it is dishonest to be a trans person, and that goes against the values of the military. So simultaneously, we're causing all of this disruption, but on the flip side, they can't find any demonstration of us causing that disruption, because, like, if we were actually disruptive, they would be able to point out examples of how we were disruptive. And every single time they're asked about it, they can't pull up any examples. It's all a hypothetical situation, which we already have, like, standards for. We already have standards for conduct in the military. There's already ways to get kicked out for that. And yeah, it's
And they're also not
how
doing
they
this.
are enforcing it.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
But, like, the enforcement of this is like, I kind of mentioned how it's essentially a witch hunt of, if commanders know that you are openly trans, they can use that against you. If you filed anything for an exception to policy to wear the uniform of your preference, that can flag you. For a lot of people, like they're saying now, the way that they're going to identify people is through the PHA, which the periodic health assessment that everybody has to do, which people lie on that. So really, you can't be 100% objective with that because it's a self survey. But relying then on medical professionals to violate HIPAA and report that to your chain of command, you can technically skirt the lines of HIPAA with being in the military for things that are genuinely unsafe. Um, but in this case, this would be a huge violation of medical privacy for all soldiers, because they're going to have to say, yes, I have these symptoms. And like we said, you don't have to have or at least you shouldn't have to have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to get gender affirming care. But in the military setting, you have to have that diagnosis. But by getting that diagnosis, you are automatically going to be flagged for separation. So it's relying on a lot of safeguards that should be in place, and relying on physicians to out their people and to report. And it's very scary seeing that they're asking for that, and that people are actually going through with it. They are reporting on that.
Well, we had a theist caller that was calling in to say that they agree with Trump's ban, but they hung up, so we're not going to have to talk to them, or get to talk to them, as the case may be. But one of the issues that I touched on kind of in my opening, and that you just touched on a moment ago, is this notion that, essentially, if you are openly trans, they view this as you are lying about your gender. But that's because they have a particular ideology that transness essentially doesn't exist, that there is no, that gender in this way, that there's only the two biological sexes, and that gender is not a thing other than that. And so you are lying. But if in fact you are using the other model, the more reliable model that says gender is about an identity that is at the intersection of biology, sociology, and psychology, and is distinct from mere sex. And by the way, mere sex in a biological sense also isn't a true binary. But even under their model, it turns out that what they're saying is, you're honest and you're being open, despite the fact that there is danger to you, and we are a potential threat to you. You're still being honest to us about who you are, but we're going to call you a liar, and then we're going to reward the people who remain in the closet or sign some waiver and do a tap dance to avoid being honest. So when they actually are hiding who they are and lying about who they are, that's what's going to end up getting rewarded by this ban, while other people who actually have integrity and are doing their jobs are the ones that are going to be outed.
Yeah, for sure. And like I keep saying, there's a lot going on. I'm thankfully okay. But I do know people who would have been medically discharged for any number of other issues, and since they're a mission essential, um, like if they're a mission essential job, they'll keep them around no matter what. Like there's an old saying, I guess, that if you're a physician, you're not going to get medically discharged. Like you will not be med boarded if you're a doctor. Um, Certain other jobs, I don't know exactly, are probably in a similar boat, but you can like lawyer up and try to get your med board that you should have in order to be safe if you have cancer or autoimmune disease, etc. Like, why are we willing to keep physicians with cancer as retainable, but we're gonna boot out trans people? Like, there's a certain double standard there too. There are people that are accused of very heinous crimes, people who are convicted of those very heinous crimes who have an excuse to stay in, and the military will, just not even pay attention and just let them stay in. But, you commit the crime of being authentically yourself in a gender that you have like legally assigned to you in DEERS. Like there's a whole system that says this is your gender that you're serving as. These are all of the standards you have to meet. And if you're trans, you already have an opportunity to change that gender marker in the military system, and you have to meet all of those standards, even though it's kind of a disadvantage on both sides of that. For example, um, like the height and weight standards are inherently going to be meant for cis people and not account for body types that come
Sure.
with a lot of gender affirming care. So, like, you have inherent disadvantages in that, but like, if you meet those standards, you should be allowed to continue. Like, I just, I don't get the like I get why they want to do this. Like I get that they're doing it in the way that they are so they can get as many out as possible so they can say that they're doing a great job. Um but you're right in that the definitions are completely inconsistent. It's incoherent across the board of what they're even trying to ban, how they're trying to ban it. But at the end of the day, the reality doesn't matter for them. They do not care if they're correct. They just want to do the work, and in that, thousands and thousands of people lose their job for no reason. Like,
Hey, I
there
know
are
you've
real
got a
consequences to this.